Resume. Our next presenter is Mr. Riyad Mohammed, and we are going to talk on how does the internet slash telecoms contribute to Trinidad and Tobago's gas and oil industry. Trinidad and Tobago is a very rich country, isn't it, Sintra Supnana? They have gas and they have oil, so it's a very rich country if you compare it with some other Caribbean islands. But in addition to be presenting only internet-related topics, as we have been doing this yesterday and today, IPv6, IXPs, and all these kind of things, it's very important to take a look at what the contribution of the internet has been with respect to one of the industries here in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is exactly what we like to do today. So we'd like to take a look how the internet has contributed to Trinidad and Tobago's gas and oil industry. And in this regard, we have Mr. Riyad Mohammed. So he's from Honeywell International, and he will be presenting with Adrian Manick as well. So I'd like to invite Mr. Riyad Mohammed, please. The floor is yours, and share us your thoughts with respect to how this rich nation, how the internet is contributing to this rich nation gas and oil industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I'd like to express our appreciation to the Internet Society for inviting us to be here and to share and talk a little bit about how the Internet benefits the oil and gas sector in Trinidad. It's a conversation about not isolated to Trinidad. The oil and gas and the energy sector is a global industry, and I think therein lies the meat of how that sector, the energy sector, leverages the internet and connectivity. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk a little bit about Honeywell. I know the audience is not familiar perhaps with the energy sector, so we're going to talk a little bit about Honeywell, who we are. We're going to look at the energy sector a little bit and see what it is, just for those who are not familiar with how the sector exists in Trinidad and the role that it plays, and then talk a little bit about how the sector itself and some details about how the sector leverages the internet. So, Honeywell, we are a global company. Over 68, present in over 68 countries, over 130,000 employees, technology-driven industry in many different industries and many different sectors, a very huge portfolio, and divided into three business divisions, and here we go. In Trinidad, our business is in this division, the Performance Materials and Technologies division, specifically in the Process Solutions business. And by process there, we mean process plants, chemical plants, the oil and gas sector. And in Trinidad, we are present across both of those. But some of the other businesses, I like to call them the exciting and sexy businesses that Honeywell is a part of, and in fact a global leader. In the aerospace business, aviation, defense, transportation, in the automation and control solutions business, in many of these sectors, fire safety, security, industrial safety, and like I said, the business that we are here present in Trinidad, or presence in Trinidad, is about in the process solutions business, but that's part of a larger division that consists of all of these, many of them patented businesses and patented products, I'm sorry. Just some of the accomplishments over the years that Honeywell has had. Developed the first autopilot controller, first turbojet. Honeywell built the first automotive turbocharger, and in fact today we are the largest turbocharger manufacturer for the automotive sector. Also very, very big and very many firsts in the safety sector as well, safety equipment, safety for buildings, safety for industrial facilities. And our presence here in Trinidad is to bring Honeywell's global reputation and quality to the local energy sector, which I think can best be represented on this one slide. And this really is what describes the oil and the gas sector of Trinidad. It shows who the major players are. It shows for the gas business, it shows the supply chain, the entire supply chain and all of the major players. And I think it also is a good way of indicating and starting the conversation about how that sector leverages the connectivity as a whole. And so just to describe it very briefly, and the easiest, of course, is oil. The major player, of course, is the state-owned Petrotrin. What I've done also is to indicate where Honeywell resides in this sector, in the supply chain. And just to tell you about what Honeywell does in each of these businesses, which I think is going to indicate the importance of connectivity, and that is that Honeywell's products or solutions, they are the heart of the operations of all of these facilities. So the equipment actually controls the refineries, the oil and gas platforms, their production rates, their safety, and of course their profitability. So that's the role that Honeywell's equipment plays in these areas. So, like I said, Petrotrin. I apologize. Petrotrin is the state-owned oil company, and they've got their suppliers and their markets. In the gas sector, you've got the upstream, the suppliers. You've got the transport, which is the National Gas Company, and you've got downstream. So this really is the gas supply chain on the island. You can see these are the major players in the sector, and in fact, many of them are not just local companies, but they are global companies. And I think that also is going to indicate that it's not a localized industry, and it cannot be thought of in a local context. It has to be thought of in a global context. And so, what part does connectivity play in all of this and in all of these organizations? So I think it was Bevel who made a point earlier that businesses, leverage the internet to improve their competitive advantage, and the oil and gas sector companies are no different. They need to be competitive. They need to know what's going on with their competitors. They need to know what's going on in the industry. They need to know what's going on in technology in their products. And so they are no different. And what I try to do here is capture some of the major activities that these companies in their own sectors, the ways that they would leverage connectivity. And so going down the line, and we'll talk a little bit in more detail about these a little bit later on, but going down the line, intelligence, business and market intelligence, business automation. And by business automation, what I'm talking about is, think of a business that is able to adjust its performance, its throughput, its production, its entire operation based on what's happening with its supply chain, its raw materials, what's happening internally with its own machinery, and what's happening downstream to its customers. And by business automation, we're talking about integrating all of that and allowing a business to fix itself and correct itself based on all of these myriad of changing dynamics. And that's enabled by connectivity. Safety. So in the oil and gas sector, as we all know, it is a high-risk sector, and people are exposed as long as they're on the facilities. So by having connectivity, you can literally remove personnel from these facilities and therefore remove them from harm's way. Operational effectiveness. Again, if we are able to understand what's happening with these facilities with not necessarily being there, it means not just from a safety perspective, but we are able to now perhaps look at, monitor, control, correct when we are not necessarily at work, perhaps when we are traveling. And so that functionality is now provided by connectivity. And bearing in mind, these are all 24/7, 365 facilities. Supply chain. I think most of the energy sector players in Trinidad now are leveraging online procurement systems, e-tendering systems, and of course, from a supply chain perspective, online commerce is now widespread in the oil and gas sector. Cost reduction, and perhaps that's one of the biggest areas. So long ago, you would have to have all of the skills that are required. And if we think of an offshore platform, you would need to have all of the skills required to maintain and operate that facility there physically. And that took either a boat trip or a helicopter flight. So today, especially in our business, and my colleague is going to talk about that, there are quite a large percentage of the activities that used to have to physically be done there that we can remotely do. And so what you've done is you've reduced the cost of moving people back and forth, and you've also, we talked about earlier, the safety element. People can work remotely. And not only that, you can have multiple subject matter experts and technology experts collaborating remotely on a particular problem in real time that's contributing to resolve problems. It makes it cheaper, it makes it faster, it makes it more effective. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in more detail, and it's actually something that we're doing right now as on a routine basis in Trinidad. We talked about technical collaboration and support, and training. So again, the oil and gas sector is no different from any other business, specialized business, that its people need to be well trained, well equipped. It's very specialized equipment, specialized systems. And again, long ago, in order to do that, you would have to move people back and forth in a small island like Trinidad. That would mean, having to go to the training facilities of major manufacturers. So what we're doing now is a lot of web-based training, and I call it for soft training, you know, a lot of that training takes place online. For some of the equipment-specific training that you know you need to feel and touch and be there, we're also doing some of that in a semi-virtual mode, and it again reduces cost, and it reduces cost to the end user. Security, we have now able now, so these facilities are now able to be monitored remotely, not just the process, but you know, video, physical perimeter security that's leveraged by connectivity. And the last major area I think that we can leverage is now, again, the technical experts. Of course, the facilities are operating 24/7, 365. A human being can't do that. But what you can do is notify and alert folks when things go wrong out there. And that functionality is something that's also being leveraged now. And we're going to talk a little bit more in some more detail. So that's just some high level of you know, some of the areas that we are leveraging. Adrian, my colleague, is going to talk a little bit more and in some more detail.
Thank you, Riyad. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to come up here to continue speaking about some of the topics that you're seeing on this slide, just to dive in a little deeper, and also to tell you a bit about some of the challenges that we've faced and how the internet and connectivity has overcome some of those challenges. So one of the main ones is technical support, offshore facilities in particular. And my colleague would have mentioned that there are several challenges in working with equipment offshore. And the first and most foremost is safety and risk. This is a big factor in the offshore environment. In fact, the goal for offshore operators is to actually have nobody on board these facilities. A lot of the times this is almost impossible, but technologies and advancements in automation are making this more of a reality as time goes by. That acronym you see at the bottom there, NUIs, is a normally unmanned installation. This is a platform which has on which there's no one, right? And so this is becoming more commonplace, right? The manned platforms of the past are being replaced by hub platforms with satellites in geographic locations so they can reach the specific reservoirs, and they're unmanning all of the NUIs and concentrating all of the mechanical equipment to process the oil or gas on the hub platforms. So we're reducing the overall number of persons offshore. So other challenges are the specialized training requirements. Of course, those of you who may have had the opportunity to go offshore would know about the T-Bosnia training and other types of specific training that you need, not only for the facility itself, but for in the event of a helicopter ditching situation. That escape survival training is required by everyone who needs to go to an offshore facility. And a lot of people don't like that because they put you in a capsule, you fill it with water, and they turn you upside down and you have to escape, right? But that and other types of specialized training, which is even more, there's even more specialized training in cold water environments, that there's a cost attached to that training as well. The remote connectivity allows people to be able to connect to these facilities, especially vendors who have equipment out there, and monitor or make changes to their systems without actually going to the site. Of course, there's the cost of the flights. You have to pay the pilots. There's freight limitations. It's actually quite expensive to send resources offshore on a regular basis. Then, of course, you have there's an offshore platform. There's a limited accommodation space. There's actually a maximum number of people on board at any given time based on the safety equipment and other things. And the POB is people on board, right? And it's very strictly controlled. So we often have a situation where you have a job scheduled to go offshore, and if something else is a priority and comes up, you get bumped off of your flight because there's simply not enough space to accommodate you on that trip. And of course, wrench time. Wrench time is actually a big factor with on offshore companies, offshore facilities. Wrench time being the amount of available time you have to work, and that is limited by the process of the work permit process, the orientation process. You have to throw in lunch there. There's demobilization process at the end before you board the chopper to come back. So, and on the NUI facilities, you do not stay overnight. So that time is shortened further. So what we are doing is we are bringing the equipment to the vendor by connectivity and through the internet. So I want to talk a little bit about predictive and preventative maintenance on these in the offshore environment. So the types of remote monitoring that are done, we have various types of equipment, rotating machinery, vessels, power systems, control systems, and of course utilities. And all of these things are mechanical systems in most senses. They are subject to wear and tear. The offshore environment is quite harsh. And even things like the air conditioning systems fail. And when they fail, lots of other things like the electronics in certain areas start to overheat and exhibit certain types of problems. So the ability to monitor these things in real time and to bring that data back to land to the people who are viewing it and who could see dashboards and where you can set alerts up is key to allow people, whether they are local or overseas, to be able to know that there's a problem with their specific piece of equipment. Because in the offshore world, there are many vendors responsible for their specific pieces of equipment. There's no one group who says we can service all of this. In fact, the operators hold each specific vendor accountable for the equipment that they have on the site. And those vendors have to provide the appropriate expertise. The remote analysis and remote alerts analysis and collaboration is exactly what I'm talking about. Bringing, for example, SMS alerts, to your phone, using the internet, and you can say, okay, something has happened, and you can respond very quickly. The offshore operators obviously are the other group of people who see things happen almost in real time. But even they don't have their eyes on everything at the same time. There's lots of pieces of equipment, and they are mostly looking at the process. They may not be looking at specific pieces of equipment. So when the signs of something happening can be captured and brought to land, it's very advantageous to the vendors and to the industry as a whole. There is also the capability to execute certain types of actions remotely. It could be from any part of the world. In fact, we've had people working with us on offshore equipment. They have the ability to restart servers, to install patches, to create backups, and even to make some types of firmware upgrades remotely, as opposed to going to the site. All of these things are done in a very, very controlled manner. As you can imagine, there are many, many gates to pass through before access can be reached from on land to offshore. Many different types of firewall and different types of rules and very careful monitoring. So it's I can't go into that in this short discussion, but it's very controlled. So just to touch on some of the other broader advantages of the internet in the oil and gas industry, but this is nothing new. These are advantages that many other industries would share. We have teleconferencing and video conferencing. The offshore platforms actually, many of them have cameras now where we would teleconference with personnel on board. We also have, there are also rooms where one would have downward-facing cameras, on a conference room on land or offshore, and we can spread documents out, PNID diagrams, different types of things, and have collaboration on those documents. And of course, between business partners as well. Help desks and ITIL support. This is another big area, right? Honeywell itself is involved in this as well. We have a service desk to some of our major clients here in Trinidad, and this allows experts to be contacted through an established framework and to open service tickets and resolve them with certain types of under certain types of rules and with certain types of metrics. And there are lots of other service providers who are connected to and who can provide services to the local offshore operators wherever they are by leveraging the internet. Fog computing is another area. Some of you may have heard this term. This is where you have appliances on the edge of the cloud, or not sometimes on the edge of the organization, but mainly on the edge of the cloud, where you're able to overcome the limitations of pushing large amounts of data into the cloud for processing and latency. Big data is the term we use for massive amounts of data that are gathered from in the offshore environment. Some of these are, for example, the seismic surveys and other types of downhole systems that monitor at a very high frequency. The reason why the frequency is so high that this data is sampled is because things happen very rapidly in some cases, and these small changes need to be captured in order to be analyzed. So you have many wells on a platform, and you have many platforms in a field, and there are many fields. And when you look at the amount of data, you're looking at tens and hundreds of thousands of tags being sampled at a high frequency. If you were to send that into the cloud to some mega data center, MDC, to process, which is usually in another country, the latency and the bandwidth is prohibitive sometimes. So fog computing is where there are devices that can probably collapse that data set before it's being sent into something that is easier to transmit. Or if you can bring the cloud closer to your area, you have certain appliances in the cloud and certain servers that can operate on that data set before it moves on deeper. Then there's business continuity and disaster recovery. This is again a common thing. Having geographically distributed components of some of the major systems, especially the data historians and equipment like that. It's a common place to have, for example, our colleagues in Gulf of Mexico, which we work with very closely. They have pieces of equipment in different states in the U.S., so that, and it's Honeywell equipment also. So if anything happens to one component, there's some watchdog between both of them, and another piece of kit is going to take over. I guess no discussion about the role of the internet would be incomplete without talking about some of the cybersecurity concerns and risks that we're faced with in the industry. There was a time where the equipment, Honeywell's equipment and other vendors indeed, was primarily proprietary. So the hardware and the software was all proprietary. Very little was known about it. But because of global competitiveness and the economics of that, we have now moved, Honeywell has moved, and the competitors, of course, have moved in the direction of off-the-shelf technologies, Microsoft and Dell servers and things like that. Some of the control hardware still remains proprietary, but many of the servers and other types of equipment are now commercially available. And these systems, in addition, were always isolated from the outside world in previous days. There was an air gap, literally, between the offshore environment and the internet. And nothing could have passed, and therefore there was very few incidents of cybersecurity breaches, except maybe from the inside. But now that connectivity is more widespread, and that and that the offshore systems, despite going through several gates, are now connected to the internet. There are a lot of concerns, and there's a wider group now looking at all the different types of cybersecurity concerns that need to be addressed. So some of the risks that we are experiencing in the industry are increased malware. There are certain types of malware that have hit process control targets, as you may have heard in the news over the past few years. There are hackers and nation states who are actually conducting espionage or other types of malicious activities in other countries or into other companies. And they have the resources to do this. We spoke about the increased reliance on the open systems. We spoke about, and then mission critical systems being managed by open systems. We consider the offshore systems as mission critical systems because their failure can result in harm to human beings or accidents and harm to the environment as well. And of course, the inability to deploy IT solutions due to the proprietary nature of those systems. So it's like ripples in a pond, really. We start with the increased accessibility requirements, and each one of these is a risk or an area of concern that has arisen from the previous one. And as you move outwards, you realize, so there's a tighter linkage now between business and process information that wasn't there years ago. There's now a larger number of tools. There are many different groups with different types of best practices, and there's lots of forums where these groups try to standardize on what we believe is best for the industry. The targeted malicious cybersecurity threats in the industry, even when we make simple changes to our equipment, a lot of testing has to be taken place. It's not like when you're at home, Microsoft says they have an update and you install it. It doesn't work like that offshore. Offshore, Microsoft says they have an update. Honeywell takes the update. It goes into labs. It's tested on mock-up systems similar to the ones offshore. It's rigorously tested to see if it causes any problems, any issues with CPU usage, with memory leaks, or any kind of other adverse effects, long-term effects. And if there is a problem, the patch could be disqualified, meaning to say it wouldn't be installed, or it might be modified, and then it will be released for installation in a particular site. So that process, we in the oil and gas industry necessarily lag behind the release of certain types of patches to ensure that it's safe to deploy. And then we have the increased emphasis on uptime and availability. This is something that's continuously monitored as a KPI in the industry, and so it's very rigorous. Let me just move forward because I know the time is running out and it's approaching lunchtime. So just to wrap it up, all right. These are the areas that